Welcome to my life. Last August, C.J. Carnaccio of the Oxford Leader wrote an article about our guest Bruce Pearson. And some of the things that he cited were the fact that Bruce was responsible for leading the efforts to upgrade parks and roads in Addison Township. The Arnold Schoolhouse was preserved and restored. A professional-looking township hall was constructed. And he got DTE Energy to fix a few problems so that they didn't have the same number of power outages, that they weren't quite as regular as they used to be. He also said, Addison Township Supervisor Bruce Pearson is a damn good supervisor, and the residents are extremely fortunate to have him. I know it's a bit early to say this because his term isn't up until 2020, but I really hope he chooses to run again. Can we pin you down on that, Bruce?
Well, I'm contemplating. Okay. I am thinking about it. I just want to make sure that I'm doing a good job and that the people want me to stay. That's things I have to know.
Well, after 9 years and all these things that you've done, do you really think they're going to scratch their heads very much before they vote?
Well, I've tried to be the best supervisor that I could be. I ran on the basis of the things I thought I could accomplish. I didn't run on any other issue. I didn't run against anybody as far as I was concerned. It was about the issues, about giving back to my community and trying to improve everybody's life in Addison Township. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of improvements that needed to be done.
Sure.
And I saw them firsthand as a deputy sheriff, driving the roads, being out of electricity all the time. These things I knew that I had the wherewithal and the knowledge on how to accomplish, to get these things fixed.
Well, you've had quite an interesting life so far. I mean, not only have you been Addison Township Supervisor for a number of years, but besides that, you've gone to college, you've traveled the world on a motorcycle, you're a first-generation American. There's just a whole list of things that we hope to navigate through. But what I usually like to do with my guests is to start out by talking about what's happening in your life right now. What's going on in Addison Township that you're trying to push along?
Well, right now we just finished the Township Hall, mm-hmm. and so as you probably have heard, we've made a sledding hill in the back. We're going to dedicate a brand new ball field that's in the very back of the Township Hall, and one of the Eagle Scouts accomplished that and spent last fall putting it all together with his troop. And I'm very proud of that because I always like to help the Eagle Scouts. They've done many projects for us in the parks and everything and been very successful putting parking lots in different things. And I like to be right down there with them, helping them, because I like to see their accomplishments be completed so they're proud of them. So I'm down there doing as much as I can, cutting wood for them, trimming, or whatever has to be done. But we also have right now, we got an extra contract from Verizon, which is at the tower in the parking lot of the Township Hall, and we had a signing bonus to extend some of our contracts with them, and so I announced that the board has decided that we think that we'll put in a small splash pad right in the park for our residents to come, and I'm hoping it's going to be a heated one because I understand that some of the splash pads are a little bit cold, so we're hoping to put ours in like with a with a pool filter, a system, and a heating system so that the people during the summer can come and enjoy the park. Those are just some of the things.
It just occurred to me, Addison Township is not a super large community, and if you really want to keep it that way, perhaps we shouldn't be talking about some of this stuff because it sounds very inviting.
Well, we do like our horse country, and we do like our open areas, and we have a policy in Addison Township to try to keep our it's a unique setting that we have. We have Lakeville Lake, which is exactly the same size as Lake Orion. People don't realize that that lake has the same acreage as Lake Orion. And then we have a small town of Leonard. It's kind of a unique town. It was an old railroad town, and of course the railroad's gone. Lakeville, there's so much history in Lakeville, and that's my passion, of course, is history. We have the oldest commercial building in Oakland County, which is right there in Lakeville, which is Mill Mine Hall. There's a lot of history there, all the way back to when Buffalo Bill stopped with Annie Oakley in Lakeville.
Did he write his name on the wall in the restroom?
No, but the train broke down, and they were traveling with their Wild West show. And anyway, so that's our claim to fame in Lakeville there. But Lakeville, Leonard opened up, or not Leonard, but Addison Township opened up somewhere around 1829, is when the government finally started to sell property in Addison Township. And 1830, of course, the mill was there. So our area, we have the mill. We have the mill in Leonard, also the mill in Lakeville. We have the oldest one-room schoolhouse that's been all refurbished. That's 1856, the Arnold School. And then we also have Mill Mine Hall, which is the oldest commercial building still standing, and it's been refurbished. So we're pretty proud that even though we're a population of maybe 6,800 people, we have all the oldest stuff in Oakland County, and we preserved it so that generations can see it in the future.
And it sounds like you're genuinely in love with the place, too.
I love the history.
Yeah.
If you look at Lakeville Cemetery, now that is dedicated as a historical marker now, too, a historical cemetery. That started in 1843. And that was Private Hewlick, who served in the militia in New Jersey during the Revolutionary War. And he, of course, immigrated to Addison Township with his family. And he's the first person buried in our cemetery. And the Daughters of the American Revolution has also dedicated that site. And then, so 1843, I think that, is it Mount Elliott or in Detroit, I think was 1845, so we're even before them. So anyways, there's a lot of history in Addison Township that people don't really realize until you tell them about it.
And as I read through your accomplishments here, such as in the article by CJ, the word that always comes up is teamwork. You're not the kind of guy who likes to brag about yourself, but you push the fact that all this stuff has only been accomplished because of teamwork.
I always say I'm a person of, I'm the doer, okay? I like to get out there and hands-on and cut the trees, but I do have, visions of what I think can be done. And you have to have vision to accomplish things, because if you don't have the vision, then nobody knows what direction to go to. So you have to tackle these things one at a time. But I'll tell you what, I have the best board, and I've had the best board since 2008. None of this could have been accomplished without the trustees and the board and the support of the citizens. I mean, the roads, we've re-gravelled every single road in Addison Township. The electrical grid, that was the worst. In a 5-year period, we had over 75 outages that lasted more than a day. The joke in Addison Township was that you have to have a generator to live out there. But you had to have multiple generators because everybody was burning up generators because we were using them so much. Now the joke is everybody's mad at me because they all went out and bought all these whole house generators, and they don't get to use them now.
Oh, my goodness.
Because we did get the electrical grid fixed.
Okay, we need to take a break right now, but I want to talk more with you about this vision and how it all came about in your life. So stay with us. Bruce Pearson.
The Canine Stray Rescue League began with one woman's dog and a dream. In 1990, Carol Powell lost her dog and searched multiple animal control centers to find him. When she did so, she discovered perfectly healthy dogs needlessly euthanized due to limited space and decided to do something about it. She traveled to multiple animal control centers to buy dogs on death row, and then sat outside supermarkets giving them away to healthy and loving homes. Around this time, Powell bought the property where Canine Stray Rescue resides to this day from a friend. There was only one building to house the dogs, and the rest remained outside in the cold. Flash forward to 2001 in Flint, when current president of the Canine Stray Rescue League, Lori Stevenson, met Carol Powell. Both passionate about dog rescue, they united their efforts and traveled across Genesee County to various animal controls to save dogs from euthanization. Until they found proper families, they often kept the dogs in their own homes. The numbers of rescued dogs grew, and Canine Stray Rescue League began to take shape. Powell and Stevenson ran it themselves with a board of directors. As their funding and popularity grew, they were able to purchase more housing for the dogs. Today, Carol Powell is retired, and keeping the dream alive, Lori Stevenson heads the canine group. She takes in dogs from all over Michigan and from states that border Ohio. Due to connections with a friend in Puerto Rico, she is able to take in strays there, still suffering from the aftermath of the hurricanes in 2017. Canine runs primarily on donations, so they're imperative to the League's survival. When asked how her rescue missions impact society, Stevenson replied that if we teach our children to have compassion for dogs, they'll treat everyone in their life with that same compassion and charity.
Here with Bruce Pearson, Addison Township Supervisor, but you didn't always live in Addison, did you?
No, I grew up in Berkeley, which is in Oakland County, and Berkeley was a great place to grow up. It was in the city.
Let's talk, before we get into that too far, let's talk about a little bit about your parents. They came here from England, is that correct?
My father, yes. My father and my grandfather, everybody came from England, and they ended up in Canada, and then from Canada they came to the United States.
So your grandfather brought your father, they all came over at one time?
They came as a family, and back then immigration was done by the family. It wasn't individual persons, so they became citizens as a family.
What was the reason they decided to come over?
Well, America was the place that everybody dreamed about to come here, just like it is today. And Iv and I had an opportunity to go live in Europe and attend the University of London, England, and I stayed with relatives and just north of London in Luton, small town of Luton. I lived in a little row house there, and I would ride my motorcycle every day into London for school. And I came back from touring all of Europe and realizing all the benefits that I had in the United States of America. And I had a real awakening when I realized that people came to this country because of the opportunities. So I came back on an immigrant ship, the Stephanie Batory, and listening to all the people who were coming over to this country for the first time and why they were coming here. I think I was 11 days on the Atlantic Ocean coming across, and I realized that I should be very grateful for being able to live in the United States of America. I was, you know, some people I think take it for granted, but sometimes you have a rude awakening and you realize, my gosh, the rest of the world doesn't live the way we do.
I want to talk more about that later, but did you have a chance to talk to your mom and dad about that? And did your dad kind of say something like, well, now you know how we felt, or?
No, my parents never, my father, he never had a formal education. He didn't graduate high school or anything like that. My mother was very smart. Now my mother, she was very book smart, and I think that's...
No, she didn't come from England, did she?
No, my mother, she was the second, well, I guess she'd be the first generation too American, but they came from Canada, from Ireland.
I see.
And so, but my mother was a very smart person, and she kept telling me, you know, and she did finish high school, but she kept telling me that this is a land of opportunity. You have an opportunity to go to college, go to college. That was always instilled in me as a young person, that it wasn't where you were, you know, it wasn't if you were going to go to college, it's where you were going to go to college. You know, it was always instilled that in this country, you had the opportunity to go where in other countries you didn't have the opportunity to go. If you didn't have the right name or you didn't have the right background, you didn't have an opportunity to seek higher education.
Did you know your grandparents?
No, I didn't. I knew my one grandfather because my grandmother had died, but I knew my grandfather from England, and just as a small child. And they were very hard workers. He worked for Ford when he came over to this country, but he was also a block layer. So they were people that liked to build things, and they ended up moving into Birmingham because Birmingham, England, is kind of where they grew up. That was outside of. They were in a little town called Wigan in England, and a lot of people from England settled in Birmingham, Michigan. So my grandfather built a lot of homes in Birmingham, Michigan.
So he ended up living in a nice area, didn't he?
Well, he did, yes, and my uncles did too. My father had. There were 4 boys, and they all fought in the war, World War II. One was a rifleman in France. One was a pilot and was shot down in New Guinea, and he won was awarded the Flying Cross. And then I had another uncle who was a spotter for submarines in the Caribbean. And my father, though, was blind in one eye, so he continued to work for Ford during the war. So, and they appreciated this country very much.
At what point did they come from Canada into the United States?
In the early 1900s is when they came to the United States.
So your father was just a boy probably then,
Yes.
huh?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, he lived to be 95 years old.
Did he meet your mother in Canada or over here?
He met her here.
Here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell me a little bit. You had an interesting story, I believe, about how your father went around to find work back in the early days.
Yeah, in the 1920, the stock market crashed in 1929. My father hopped on a motorcycle and he traveled the country.
Was he married at this point?
No. He hopped on the motorcycle and he traveled the country on a 1925 Harley. And he rode all the way down to Miami. And my father and I, years later, went down on our motorcycles when he was close to 90 years old, and he showed me where he used to camp outside of Miami and catch frogs, and he would sell them to the local restaurants to live. Well, then when the Depression hit and there was no work, he put that 1925 Harley up against a tree, put free on it, and he started hopping trains around the country. And he ended up in New Jersey and got a job. And then he bought a 1927 Excelsior, and I think there's some pictures I brought.
How did he get interested in motorcycles?
Well, that was probably not the in thing to do at that time as far as your parents were concerned. But I guess for a young man, that was probably a way of expressing your freedom, that you could hop on a motorcycle and go anywhere in the country.
That's quite an image here. We've got this young guy with a British accent riding a motorcycle around the country during the Depression.
And, I don't know how that ever came back to me, because when I was a young man, my father never mentioned motorcycles. He didn't want us to know anything, because I think that was my mother. She didn't want me to have anything to do with motorcycles. And then all of a sudden, when I was just 14, 15 years old, all of a sudden, my dad finally admitted, after I wanted motorcycles, that, well, he too had been into motorcycles. And I didn't know it until that time, so he never showed me the pictures of him traveling the country. Well, then when I was 18 years old, one day after I graduated high school, I took off with all my gear on my motorcycle.
Okay, we're going to get into that. We need to take a little break here. Don't go away. Don't go away.
There's a lot of history to Oxford. Hidden around every corner, deep in every crack, and sometimes right in front of you, waiting to be discovered. If you just dig a little, you'll find the great history of our beautiful town. Welcome to Historic Oxford. Do you love local sports? Whether it's Oxford High School or Parks and Rec, you can buy copies of each game. To purchase your copy, call us at 248-628-9658 or give us an email at manager@occtv.org or talk to us at the next game. Hopefully we'll see you there.
Back with Addison Township Supervisor Bruce Pearson. Talking about riding motorcycles with your dad. Did he ever see Easy Rider?
I did. 1969, I saw
But did he?
You know, I suspect he probably
And did he
did.
say yes?
Well, he was an Easy Rider before there was an Easy Rider.
That's right, he was.
Yes.
Now, at what point did he meet your mother?
I think somewhere around 1933. They got married in 1935 in Pontiac.
So it was Pontiac.
Mm-hmm.
What brought him back to this area?
I'm sure it was family, you know, and he ended up riding his motorcycle back. He had stayed on the Jersey shore for a while, and but I believe probably work. You know, you got to remember that the Depression. They were married in the middle of the Depression, and I think he just came back to this area. But at that time, things were starting to pick up because it was just before World War II also. So, and then of course he worked at Ford's himself.
So that's the occupation he finally found.
He was a mechanic, but then he couldn't be a mechanic anymore because back then people didn't have gloves or anything, and he became allergic to oil because he was a mechanic. So he ended up working and retiring out of the Berkeley School District. He was the custodian there, yes.
Okay. Well, so he did get into education a little bit?
Yeah, my father, yes, he was the custodian at the elementary school that I went to, and he helped build the elementary school in Berkeley there. And he retired after 30-some years there at Berkeley schools there.
Let's talk about your mother for a minute. Did she work outside the home at all?
No, my mother was a professional nanny, okay, and so she mentored many professional people's children, so that when they were born, by the time they got into kindergarten, whatever, she had them reading, writing, everything, and so she was a professional nanny, and she won the one of the Detroit News and Michigan Spelling Bees in 1929. And she was one of 9 children. They were very poor. They lived on a farm outside of 10 Mile in Southfield. And she would walk all the way from Southfield into Berkeley High School every day to graduate from Berkeley. And you talk about, you know, all of our kids can't walk a block to school. She walked from Southfield to Berkeley because that was the only school around.
Did you say her father was in education?
No. He was Ford. Worked at Ford also.
But hey, that was a nice area they were living in.
Well, it was farm. They had no water. There were 9 kids. They didn't have a car at that time. They did have a horse. They had to walk 2 farms down to get water because they just never had a well. It was a rough life. My grandfather used to walk down 10 Mile. I had an uncle who was killed on 10 Mile. The Model Ts used to jump out of the mud tracks, and he was killed on 10 Mile Road there. But he would walk all the way down from Southfield all the way down to Woodward to hop on the trolley to get to the Ford plant in Highland Park. So, I mean, there was a lot of walking back then.
Okay, now once again, you grew up in?
Berkeley.
Okay, Berkeley. Pretty nice area.
Yes, I was very fortunate.
Now, let's focus a little bit on your early life in Berkeley. What grade school did you go to?
I went to Hamilton Elementary School. Then I went to the Addison Middle School, and then Berkeley High School.
Okay. What neighborhood were you living in Berkeley in elementary school?
Well, when I was first born, we had a house in right by the high school, but I had a brother named Billy. He was 13 years old. He ended up dying from polio, and I was in the hospital at the same time. And
With polio?
yes, and so I survived. He didn't. Then after that, we were kind of out of money, so we moved to my grandpa's farm in Southfield, and we lost the home in Berkeley. And so I actually started at McKinley Elementary School in Southfield when I was all the way up to the third grade. And then we got back on our feet and we moved back into Berkeley after that.
Okay. Now, just as I look back at my own childhood, when I was a kid, that was the day those were the days that they rolled out the polio vaccine.
Yes. Yes.
You guys weren't able to.
That was before that. I think I remember getting a little sugar cube, the little pink sugar cube myself, and I think that was, boy, I'm trying to think what year that would have been. That was in the 50s.
Yeah, that was in the 50s when
Right. Mm-hmm.
I remember the long lines going through this.
Right, and that was just at the breaking point when that was developed, and it wasn't available before that.
Okay. Talk about your young life with your parents. What were some of the favorite things you did back then?
Well, my dad, because he worked at the schools, he had a lot of summers off, so we traveled the country. And my father had we were the first, what you'd call vagabonds. We had a trailer. My dad had, he had wandering feet. He loved to travel, so I traveled Route 66 twice out to California. I remember always looking for the world's biggest ball of yarn, or whatever they always said, or the jackalope or whatever, but those were exciting days traveling Route 66. I remember as a kid going out to Los Angeles several times that way, but my dad always had the itch to travel, and so we traveled our summers. We traveled extensively, and always with a little trailer behind our car. So I have traveled throughout every state in the United States except Hawaii now. And when I got to be 18 years old, I got up and left myself and traveled the country.
Now, how many siblings did you have?
Well, there were actually 6 of us. There's 3 of us left.
Okay, so you guys filled up that little trailer, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. There's a wide range between my oldest sister and my younger sister. There's 20 years difference.
So where did you fall in?
I was right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, I have an older sister who is 80 years old, and then my younger sister who is just 60 years old. So there's a wide range of there's generation there.
Well, obviously you didn't lead a boring life as a kid.
No. I made my own way. You know, I look at the kids today. I don't know how they go to college because of the expense. It's really something. I paid for my own way through college. I worked side jobs. I worked at Suzuki Restaurant for my first 2 years. Then I worked, when I went to the University of Minnesota, I worked at a little factory right next to Tonka Toys on Lake Minnetonka, and I built sheet metal parts. And I paid for my own way through school.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and when I came out of school, I had no debt. I had no money, but I had no debt. And I don't know how the kids do it these days, because I can remember paying $35 of credit, and I don't know what it is now, but they say it's several hundred.
Yeah.
You know. So I was very fortunate. So
I want to have we want to keep this interview going with you. We've got a lot more ground to cover, folks. So we're going to have another segment with you if you don't mind. And I want to focus a little more on your early days with your parents, and on how you continued your vagabond experiences, driving the motorcycle around the world, really, and a number of other things. So don't go away, because if you do, you'll miss a lot.